Good afternoon, everyone. Great day to have a nice clean social, right? My name's Mackey, and as you just heard, I'm running for Assembly District 101, otherwise known as the Snake District. It's 131 miles from the top to the bottom, and about 30 miles from the widest point to cross. It goes from Madison County down to the middle of Orange County, and the northern and southern portions of my district could not be more polar opposite of each other in terms of issues, the range of public resources that are available, and a little bit about me. If I'm elected, I would be the first New York State legislator who is a non-binary person. And the second in the entire country. So I grew up on a small little apple farm called Mackey Farms in Milton, New York, which is in Ulster County. I also grew up in Bloomingburg in Sullivan County. So I've lived in the Hudson Valley, Catskill region my entire life. I'm very familiar with rural issues. But today, I wanted to talk to you all about what our party represents and what the other party represents. Republicans right now are trying to strip away the rights of LGBTQ people, of women, of people with uteruses, and trying to return us to a time where discrimination and oppression was prevalent, because Republicans are only running for Republicans. They're not running for everyone. Democrats are running to make sure that everyone, regardless of your party, regardless of your religious beliefs, regardless of who you are, how you identify, what you believe in, or where you're from, that you are protected, that you have the right to exist in freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Republicans are the party of despair, and the only thing that defeats despair is hope. And we are the party of hope. We are the party of change. We are the party of making sure that every single person is protected, because we're not running just to be Democrats. We're running for everyone. Yeah. So, a little bit about me. I have two deaf parents. My mom and dad both met when they were in elementary school at White Plains School for the Deaf. And I've been a public advocate my entire life. I grew up in a time where the Americans with Disabilities Act was just enacted, but the resources weren't available for public entities to take advantage of, to make sure my parents were able to have the same opportunities that most hearing people take for granted every day. So at a very young age, 2 or 3 years old, I became their advocate. I answered their phones. I went to doctor's appointments. I had to deliver news that as a 3-year-old, I didn't understand why my mom and dad were really upset at information, because I just couldn't process it. Growing up, I advocated to my high school and other public resources to make sure they had an interpreter available for my parents so they could participate in school functions. Because, again, most of that is taken for granted every day. In fact, right now, there's still a huge issue, Josh, I hope you're listening, with the Americans with Disabilities Act, because it doesn't cover freelancers with disabilities in the United States. Which means that if you have a disability as a freelancer, you don't have any protections. There's a constituent who lives in my district who is deaf, or has a hearing disability, she's not deaf, and she's also a reporter. And she can't get hired by newspapers because she can't do her interviews in person. She does them over email. And newspapers won't hire her because she has to do that for her disability. And she doesn't have any protections for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that needs to change in Congress, but we can also do that at the state level. We can also, make sure that everyone is guaranteed health care as a human right in New York State and invest in mental health and mental health care facilities. I heard a story from a constituent the other day who works as a secretary at a medical facility, and she was trying to book an appointment for a first-time client for mental health, and the next available appointment was 8 months. For someone who's going through a mental health crisis, 8 months is literally the difference between life and death. Unless they can get in and see that provider right away. Which thankfully, in the New York State budget this year, they didn't cut 200 mental health beds, but there was that option available. It was in the budget originally, until mental health providers stepped up and said, absolutely not. There's already a shortage. And in upstate rural Delaware, and in Otsego, and in Madison counties, where you sometimes have to drive 2 hours to your medical appointments, that are 6 or 8 months booked out, that's completely unacceptable in one of the richest states in the country and in the wealthiest country in the world. I became a family advocate for children with special needs, and ironically was hired by an insurance company to fight the insurance company every single day on behalf of families. Fighting the loopholes that seriously hurt people every single day. And people ask me all the time why I decided to run, but it's not really a why, it's a because. Or not a because, it's a moment. I had a client who was a 12-year-old traumatic brain injury patient from an accidental gunshot wound to the brain. And he was in a medically induced coma for 8 months while his brain was being repaired. And the insurance company I worked for was denying $2 million worth of medical claims for the entire stay. That's how the client was introduced to me. So I fought for 6 months to get all of those bills paid. And in that 6 months, my client's child was out of his coma and in inpatient rehabilitation to learn how to walk and to talk again. And he was making great progress. As a family advocate, I treated every single person, and just in life in general, I treat everyone as if they're my own family. I would never want to see anyone get hurt. So I fought every single day to make sure that this client had the resources available to them so that he could learn how to walk and talk again. And several months into that, COVID started. And his medical team and I argued with our insurance company to make sure that he could get outpatient therapy services to continue his rehabilitation to learn to walk and talk, because they said if he gets COVID, his immune system will not work. He will die. And for another 3 months, I fought to make sure that this person got their treatment, but the insurance company kept denying it. And then he got COVID and he died. And I took my anger and my frustration and my sadness after working with this family for over a year and a half and celebrating the joys of every milestone of relearning how to walk and talk and sharing in the despair with this family. I was distraught. And I knew the loopholes. I knew the issues in the insurance company that make it so that insurance company can literally get away with murder. Because that's what happened. Do I know whether or not the insurance company, if they approved it, whether or not he would have gotten COVID at home? I don't know that. But what I do know is he had one hell of a less chance to get COVID. And that is what made me decide I'm going to become a social worker, jump into policy, study the issues, and break it down so that we understand how policies impact communities and individuals. Policies that are legal, that lead to life and death decisions for people, or when people are just forcibly had to end their lives. Sorry, y'all. That was deep. But it's an issue that I'm extremely passionate about. Healthcare, and especially rural healthcare and mental health care, is so lacking. And the reason for this is because we don't have representatives in Albany that have any leverage or power to bring resources to this district. It's not a commentary on Republican leadership. It's not a commentary on Republicans in general. Our state assembly and state senate doesn't have a majority of Republicans. And so if you're a Republican, you can get nothing done, which means that my district, your district, will suffer if a Republican is elected. And that's just math. So it's with a lot of hope that we can get through this despair together, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to win, is together. Together, change is possible. And so in November, I hope you make sure you tell 10 friends to go vote up and down the ballot for Democrats, because the extremism needs to end. Thank you.